Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. Happy Monday. Hope you guys all had an amazing weekend, and if you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases on this channel on Mondays, so if that's something you're interested in, then please come and join us and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Misty Copsey, and she disappeared in 1992 when she was just 14 years old. She disappeared after attending a fair. So she went out for a night with her best friend. They went to a fair together. It was meant to be a really great night, and she missed the last bus home and she was just never seen again. Her mother never heard from her again. And there is just so much going on in this case. There's so many people potentially involved, and the police work in this one, you guys, is so frustrating. The Puyallup police really dropped the ball on this one, and it's so infuriating. You'll see as we get into the case, but it's just their attitude towards the whole case is just probably some of the worst I've seen, and we've seen a lot of bad police work going on in these cases, so brace yourself. Before we do get into the case, I just quickly want to thank our sponsor, Saley. If you guys somehow haven't heard me talk about them before, they are my go-to eSIM provider. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of travel over the past couple of years while living in the UK, and just really trying to make the most of our short time here because we go back to Australia next year. But they have just made the process so easy every single time. They take so much stress out of traveling. I actually just got back from Cyprus just a couple of days ago. We did a long weekend there, 4 days, and it was incredible, you guys. But my phone plan doesn't cover Cyprus, so I used Saley, and honestly, it took me seconds to sign up for it. All you have to do is go on the app, select the country, select the plan, and that's it. It takes genuinely less than a minute to get the eSIM that you need. I think I mentioned in my last video that I went to Turkey recently, and Kerry forgot to get an eSIM there because he thought that it was included in his plan. And then when we got back to the UK, he got hit with a £200 bill. I knew that it wasn't included in my phone plan, so I signed up on Saley. It cost me $7. So guys, don't forget your eSIM. Saley has data plans for over 200 countries and regions, and they are iOS compatible, they're Android compatible, and if you sign up and find out that your device is not compatible with an eSIM, then you can get a full refund. So definitely make sure you guys check them out, and if you download the app, you can get 15% off your first purchase of a Saley eSIM data plan if you use code BELLAFIORE at checkout. So I will leave all of that information in the description box down below for you guys. Make sure you check that out, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So Misty Donna Copsey was born in Washington on the 10th of March 1978 to parents Diana Smith and Paul Copsey, who went by Buck. They actually divorced shortly after she was born, and so Misty primarily grew up with her mum. By 1992, she was 14, and she and her mum were living in Spanaway, and Misty was attending Spanaway Lake Junior High School. They had only just recently moved there from Puyallup Green Meadows Mobile Home Park because Diana just wanted to give Misty, I guess, a bit of a better living situation, and Spanaway was generally considered a nicer area. So they moved to a duplex there, and, you know, having grown up in Puyallup, all of her friends were living there. It was only 15 minutes away, but she was now living in this whole new neighborhood where she really didn't know anyone, so she obviously kept in touch with all of her friends from Green Meadows, especially her best friend Trina Bavard. They were so close, and they even had these pet nicknames for each other. So Misty would call Trina Bean, and Trina would call Misty Bunyan. It really wasn't that big of an issue, the move and moving to a new place, because Misty honestly had no trouble from the sounds of it making any friends. She was very popular. She was very well liked. She was somebody that kids just wanted to be friends with because she had this goofy personality that people just wanted to be around. She got good grades. She loved sports. She played softball, basketball, volleyball. She was a good kid. She didn't smoke. She didn't drink. She didn't do drugs. And she was really only just sort of becoming interested in boys. And she was a very responsible young girl. She kind of had to learn to be responsible at quite a young age and look after herself because her mum often worked night shifts. She was a carer for the elderly. So Misty often had to take care of herself. And then even more so because Diana definitely had her issues. She wanted only the best for her daughter. She loved Misty. But, you know, she found being a single mum at such a young age, like in her 20s, quite overwhelming as well. So she struggled a little bit with alcoholism. So on Thursday, the 17th of September, 1992, Misty and her best friend Trina really wanted to go to the fair in Puyallup, but Diana was working that night. So she was caring for a 97-year-old woman who she cared for often, but she needed round-the-clock care. She needed constant supervision, so she couldn't just leave, take a little bit of time to go and pick the girls up. And so the girls would have to find their own way home from the fair, and she really didn't feel comfortable with that. You know, these girls were only 14 years old, so she didn't feel comfortable with them going alone, no supervision, no adult with them, nobody older with them, and them having to find their way home at night as well. It just wasn't something she felt comfortable with. But Trina and Misty, they really, really wanted to go. They begged and they begged until eventually she told them that they could go as long as they promised to get the last bus home, which was at 8:40 p.m. They couldn't miss it. Trina's parents were also reluctant to let her go for the same reasons. So Diana, you know, she wanted to be the cool parent. She wanted to, you know, she knew the girls really wanted to go. So she told Trina's parents a little white lie, and she told them that she was going to pick the girls up from the fair that night, which was a lie, but it gave them peace of mind. And so they agreed to let Trina go with Misty to the fair. That night, Diana drops them off at the fair and the girls just have a blast. They have the best time together and they have such a good time that they lost track of time and they actually missed that last bus home. So at 8:45, Misty calls her mum from a payphone and asks if there's any way that she can come and pick them up. And Diana can't. She said, you know, I'm looking after this woman who can't be left alone. And she was really disappointed in Misty because it was the one condition she had to let these girls go to the fair after she'd been so reluctant to do so. And so she told Misty that she's just going to need to call around and find somebody that can give them a lift home. And so Misty responds to that and she says, fine, I'll just call Reuben then. And this is Reuben Schmidt. So this is a boy that Diana really doesn't like. So Misty was kind of saying it, I guess, in a little bit of a, well, if you can't pick me up, I'm going to call Reuben. They had met at Green Meadows and he was 18 years old and he had a car. And there were claims that he was romantically interested in Misty, which is obviously weird considering the age difference. And he was also just a bit of a dirtbag. You know, he had dropped out of high school and he was kind of just hanging around with all of these young girls. Diana also allegedly heard him say something sexual to Misty over the phone one night, something along the lines of telling her how horny she made him. So for obvious reasons, as Misty's mother, Diana did not like this guy. Misty also wasn't interested in him in this way, but she was 14 and he had a car. So it was just like kind of a convenience thing, I guess, to get her to places. But there was no way Diana wanted Misty going home with him. So she said, no, you're going to call around and you're going to find somebody else to drive you home. And you're going to call me once you've found whoever it is and let me know that you're going home and who with. Now at this point, Trina decides that she's going to walk home because she actually lives nearby, whereas Misty, she didn't really have that option because she lived a bit further away. So she's now just kind of sitting alone at night trying to figure out how she's going to get home. Diana waited all night to hear how she got home or that she got home or who she was getting a lift with, but Misty never called and Diana never heard from her daughter again. She spent the rest of the night at work just in a state of worry. She was just worrying about her daughter. She called the home phone to see if Misty was home, but there was no answer. And she was just trying to tell herself that she'd gotten home and she'd fallen asleep and that's why she didn't answer. And the reason that she didn't call her to tell her who she was getting a ride home from is because she did get a ride home from Reuben and she didn't want her mum to be mad and she could deal with the consequences of that when she got home. But early the next morning when she got home from work, there was no sign of Misty at the house. Immediately, she starts calling everybody that she can think of in a panic. She calls Trina, but Trina's already left for school, so she didn't answer. She called her mother, Misty's grandmother, who was no help. She called Reuben, who said that he did get a call from Misty that night, but he didn't go and pick her up because he didn't have enough fuel. Her next call was to the police, and what is so crazy about this phone call is that the dispatcher tells her that she can't report her missing for 30 days and she was just going to be considered a runaway until then, which is insane because it's like, oh, I'm so sorry that your 14-year-old daughter is missing. Give us a call in a month if she hasn't shown up. I mean, you always hear of this sort of thing in these cases. The amount of cases that I've done and the police always say some shit like you can't report them missing for 24 to 72 hours, whatever the timeline is, which is not the case, by the way. You can report somebody missing straight away, and you should because that first 24 hours is the most important. But 30 days is the most insane thing I've I've never actually heard that. I've never heard a police department say you can't report them missing for 30 days. It is just so negligent. I can't even believe. Anyway, Diana gets off the phone and she, of course, the police aren't going to help her. So she starts searching herself. She's calling everyone she can. She's driving around in her car, searching everywhere she can think of. She goes to Trina's house and she leaves a note on her front door, basically just saying, call me as soon as you get home. That afternoon at around 1:30 p.m., she decides to go into the Pierce County Sheriff's Office, which they look after the Spanaway area where they lived. So she goes in and the woman there told her that police dispatcher was just totally incorrect. She was way off base with the 30 days. So she actually is able to file a missing persons report right then and there. But then they just make things so difficult, right? So because she technically disappeared in Puyallup, the Pierce County Department couldn't actually get involved unless they got special permission from the Puyallup PD. And they're actually the ones who told her that Misty was just going to be considered a runaway for the first 30 days and then she could report her missing. Honestly, it just sounds like a nightmare of a situation, but there was really nothing that she could do about it. She basically just had to wait. I mean, what can she do? The Puyallup police aren't going to look into it until 30 days have passed and she's not considered a runaway anymore. So with literally no help from the police, the people that are meant to help her in this situation, she has no choice but to continue searching for her daughter herself because she knows that Misty is not a runaway. She had no reason to run away. I mean, she was actively trying to get home when she disappeared. Eventually that afternoon, after Trina got home from school, she called Diana. She told her everything from the night before, but told her, obviously, eventually she walked home, they parted ways, and she has no idea what happened to Misty after that. She has no idea what Misty's plans were, how she was going to get home, nothing. So when Diana gets off that phone call, she decides to call Reuben again because she just thinks that he knows more than he's letting on, especially because he was the last person that Misty mentioned to her that she was going to call Reuben and get a lift home. So she calls Reuben, but he's not home at the time. His roommate, James Tinsley, is. And Diana talks to James on the phone and he actually tells her that Reuben did in fact go and pick Misty up that night. He and his uncle went together to pick Misty up. So later that afternoon, Diana calls Reuben again when he's home and he answers the call. Diana is pissed at this point because it's this loser guy. She already doesn't like him and now he has lied about picking her daughter up, potentially being the last one who saw her alive. But Reuben explains that James had it wrong, that he did leave the house, he did go out with his uncle, but he didn't go to pick Misty up. He actually went to a party with his uncle. Obviously something here is not adding up because first of all, his story's changed, which is sketchy in and of itself because why are you lying to the mother of a missing 14-year-old girl? Second of all, his original story is that he couldn't go pick Misty up because he didn't have enough fuel. But now he's saying that he went to a party, he drove there with his uncle, and he would have needed fuel to go to the party, right? Diana, though, in her, her worry and her panic, she's just thinking about Misty and her daughter and how to get her home and how to find her. She didn't really pick up on these little things. She kind of just had to take him at his word. She just continues driving around town looking for Misty. She makes up a whole bunch of flyers and puts them up around town and gives them out to businesses. She's calling all of Misty's friends and just saying, if you're covering for her, if there's something she's done that's wrong or, that she might get in trouble for, just tell me. I just need to know that she's safe. There's not going to be any repercussions. I just need to know that she's safe. Unfortunately, though, none of them had any information. None of them had seen Misty. No one had heard from Misty. Eventually, Diana manages to track down the bus driver who was driving the bus that Misty had missed that night. So his bus route was from Puyallup to Spanaway, and he said that he had actually seen Misty that night. So he had seen her, I guess, on the side of the road. He had spoken to her, told her that he wasn't going to her stop and that she could instead get a bus from Puyallup to Tacoma, and from Tacoma she could get a bus home. This supposedly happened at 9:20 p.m. He has no idea if she got that bus to Tacoma. He has no idea what happened to her after that conversation. Apparently, she wasn't really listening to him. She was kind of just walking away. And so he really has no idea what happened to her after that or where she went. Over the next few days, Diana, she had friends and family checking in on her and if she had found Misty, heard from Misty. But one person that really stood out to her that continuously was checking if Misty was okay, if she'd found her, if she'd heard from her, was Reuben. He kept periodically checking in on her over those few days following the disappearance, which just stood out to her because, she already thought he was sketchy, he'd lied to her, and now he's checking in quite a few times if there was any progress, any updates. About a week after the disappearance, so on the 23rd of September, Diana was finally able to report Misty as a missing person with the Puyallup PD. So this is a week after she disappeared. She's finally able to do this. And their issue is they're still not really being proactive about the case because they still believe that Misty is just a runaway at this point. They thought that, it's going to be fine. She's going to come home eventually. Despite this belief, they do kind of start looking into the case slowly. Sergeant Herm Carver from the Puyallup PD was put in charge of Misty's case, and he received a fax from Pierce County, which contained, some documents from the case, that sort of thing. And then there was also a personal note on it that read, quote, "This is one of those that just don't feel right reports. There's nothing contained here that points positively to foul play. It just doesn't feel right." So they kind of start looking into it a little bit, really bare minimum kind of amount. 2 days later, on the 25th of September, they send out 2 officers to kind of scope out the fairgrounds. They talk to a few witnesses there. Nobody has any information, has seen or heard from Misty. So at this point, they actually turn their attention on her mother, Diana. Like I mentioned, she struggled a little bit with alcoholism. She was somewhat of a functioning alcoholic, but by all accounts, she was a great mother who really, really cared for her daughter. Above all else, she loved Misty. Obviously, they had their squabbles. What parent and teenager does not have their squabbles? But overall, at the end of the day, they had a strong relationship. Diana also had a couple of prior run-ins with the law, so, DUIs. She also had a conviction for welfare fraud. Basically, she was collecting food stamps while she was employed, which she actually turned herself in for. She went down to the welfare office, she was feeling guilty, she told them exactly what she'd done, and so, they let her off pretty easy. They said, "We just want you to repay us," which she did, and she received a deferred sentence. I honestly think she had good intentions as well. She was just, she was a single mum in her 20s. She was overwhelmed. She just really wanted the best for her daughter. She was trying to do what she thought was best. She had a moment of misjudgment and she felt guilty about it. Now, what the police did find when they were looking into Diana that kind of raised their eyebrows a bit is that she actually had reported Misty missing just a few months prior in August, and Misty wasn't missing at the time. So they had an argument. Misty left. Diana couldn't find her. She contacted the police, reported her missing. And then when she got home, Misty was just kind of sitting on her bed. And Diana didn't call the police again to update them because, I think she was just embarrassed by the situation. And to be fair, the police also never followed it up. But it really didn't help the police at this time in believing that Misty was really missing. They already had this idea in their mind that she was just a runaway. Anyway, so on the 29th of September, Sergeant Carver decides to go to Misty's school and speak to a few of the students there. They'd been talking, they'd been spreading rumors, they had been telling stories because they're kids and that's what they do. He spoke to one girl there who said that she had actually received a phone call from Misty since her disappearance. And she claimed that Misty had told her that she was in Olympia and that she was fine. And Olympia is about 35 minutes away from Spanaway. And then there was also another girl who said that she saw Misty on the 21st of September at a concert. So that's 4 days after she disappeared. So obviously for police at this point, everything is pointing to Misty being a runaway because they already, in their minds, they think she's a runaway. And then they hear these 2 stories and they're like, that's basically confirmed it for them. So they tell Diana that they're removing Misty from the missing persons database and they're labeling her as a runaway. And what's shit about this as well is that if they had looked into the case for more than 2 seconds, they would know that it doesn't even make sense for her to have run away. She was happy, she had a good home life, she had a strong relationship with her mum, she had a lot of friends around, she was a responsible girl, and she had also actively been trying to get home at the time of her disappearance. It doesn't make sense for her to be literally trying to get home and then she just is like, you know what, I'm just gonna run away instead. Police came to this conclusion without even speaking to Trina. They never spoke to Reuben. And the 2 girls that they spoke to at Misty's school weren't even friends with Misty. So if Misty was going to call anyone, it certainly wouldn't be this random girl that she didn't even know, really. She was just kind of an acquaintance at school. And actually in 2008, this girl told a news outlet that she couldn't remember the phone call and said, quote, "I just wanted to be her friend, be a part of the cool kids. I just remember that I wanted to be part of her circle." So it honestly seems to me anyway, like she just wanted to be part of the investigation. She just wanted to get, some street cred at school. She thought Misty was cool. So now that Misty was gone, she could pretend that she was friends enough with Misty that Misty would call her out of anybody else once she's missing. Also, following Sergeant Carver's visit to the school, he does a radio interview where he outright says Misty is not missing. She's a runaway, and in fact, he actually said Diana knows exactly where Misty is. So basically, the Puyallup Police Department, they wanted to stop this narrative that the media was circulating that Misty was a missing girl. And as a result of his interview, the media stopped reporting on Misty completely. All of the businesses started taking the missing person flyers down, and everybody stopped looking for her. And this was devastating for Diana because now she was all on her own in looking for her daughter, and now nobody even believed that her daughter was missing. That was until she got a call from a stranger, a 26-year-old man named Corey Boba. Now, Corey was basically a typical stoner type, but as you come to learn more about him, he is just a lot more than that label. He's a very interesting guy. He pretty much spent his free time in between jobs, of which included small-time weed dealer, looking into the Green River Killer who killed mostly sex workers and runaways in the Northwest. He was obsessed with this case. He just spent hours and hours over years and years looking into this case, gathering evidence, tracking down suspects, questioning people. He would harass the police into looking into the evidence he gathered, which they never did. He was actually convinced that an acquaintance of his, a man named Randy Axiger, was the Green River Killer, and he had spent all of these years trying to prove that. And basically his suspicions of Randy were based around the fact that Randy had once told him a fact about the Green River Killer investigation, which only the killer or the police could have known. Allegedly, he told Corey that the Green River Killer would insert rocks inside his victims' remains. He claims that he got this information from a drunk cop, which Corey he did not buy that. And, he was just convinced he was the killer. He had basically harassed the police. He'd called the police out publicly so many times that they were essentially forced to put Randy on the suspect list. They did end up clearing him as a suspect, but Corey just didn't care, and he basically spent his life building a case against him. He has followed Randy around. He has broken into his house to try and get evidence, and, he's tracked people down that know him and interviewed them, and he's just spent hours and hours and years doing things like that. So one day he calls Diana and he tells her that he believes that Misty's disappearance is connected to the murders of two young girls from Puyallup, 14-year-old Anna Chibetnoy and 15-year-old Kimberly DeLange, who he believes are all victims of the Green River Killer. This connection hadn't been established by law enforcement yet, but his theory was based off the fact that all three girls had gone missing within 2 years and 1 month of each other. So he had actually predicted that another girl would go missing in Puyallup in September of 1992 because it was exactly 2 years and 1 month after Anna Chibetnoy's disappearance and murder. He even claims that he went to the police and told them and warned them of this, but there isn't any actual record of this report. He also told Diana that based on his research, there was pretty much no chance that Misty was still alive, which it was of course devastating for Diana to hear this, but he was the only one that believed that Misty wasn't a runaway and that something had happened to her. So of course she started working together with Corey in looking for her daughter. So on the 5th of October, Corey calls Sergeant Carver to talk about Misty, Sergeant Carver from the Puyallup PD, and Sergeant Carver just immediately shuts him down. Misty is not missing. She is a runaway. Diana, she's a bad mum. She's got a drinking problem. She's dishonest. Her and Misty have a strained relationship. And because he believed that she was a runaway, the case had been handed over to the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. So Corey calls up the sheriff's deputy, Brian Coburn, who is now handling the investigation. And Brian allegedly tells Corey that even if they found Misty, they wouldn't tell him, and they wouldn't even tell Diana. Allegedly, Corey responded and said, quote, "She's dead. You'll find her body, but she's been murdered. Just wait, you'll see." To which Coburn allegedly responded, quote, "Well, if she's found to have been murdered, it's unfortunate she met her fate as a runaway." And if this conversation is true, first of all, it's such a messed up way to talk about a missing 14-year-old girl. But it also just showed that, the police weren't interested in this case, and they weren't interested in any theories that didn't involve her being a runaway. As a result, Corey, it's clear the police aren't going to work with him. So he wants to get the case out there. He wants to get people talking about it, get people looking for Misty. So he turns to the media, which maybe given the circumstances wasn't his best idea. The police, they were totally sick of this guy. So after he goes to the media, they had heard that he was dealing marijuana. So they actually set up a sting operation and they arrested him on the 15th of October. And despite only being found with 7 grams of weed and $149 in cash, he was charged with 4 counts of dealing marijuana and 2 counts of possession. His bail was set at $50,000, which he did make, but he was facing up to 4 years in prison. The police were just so sick of this guy that they were going after him full force. And also after his arrest, both Carver and Coburn went and spoke to Diana, and they basically said, this guy that you're working with, he's a stoner, he's a drug dealer, and working with him is only going to hinder the non-existent investigation into your daughter's disappearance. They actually also convinced her to file a restraining order against Corey after Misty's missing person status was reactivated. But as it turns out, doing that was just a formality because it had reached the 30 days since her disappearance. So she formally wasn't considered a runaway anymore. She was considered a missing person. Diana even confided in the officers about some of the illegal things Corey had done in his investigation. But 2 weeks later, she had a change of heart. She dropped the restraining order because, he was the only person that believed in her. He was somebody that she had confided in. She had cried to him. He had helped her get involved with some support groups. And he was the only person, literally the only person, helping her look for her missing daughter. So in November of 1992, the King County Police Department announced that they were actually reopening the investigation into the Green River Killer and that they were considering the possibility that those 2 murdered girls from Puyallup, Anna and Kimberly, were also victims of his. In the wake of this, Corey managed to convince an investigator from the medical examiner's office to tell him where Anna and Kimberly's bodies had been found. And so he learned that their remains had been discovered off Highway 410 near Marker 30. With this information, he started organizing search parties to go out to the area and try and locate Misty's remains. On the 28th of November, he took a search party of 25 people out there, but unfortunately, they didn't find anything. And then in December, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department actually made a change to Misty's file, and they were now finally considering her missing under suspicious circumstances. And they said that they now believed that foul play had been involved in her disappearance. About a week after this announcement, Corey took to the news, he took to the media again to basically announce his theory that he believed all 3 cases of Anna, Kimberly, and Misty were connected. And the reason that he did this is because he believed that this killer was somebody who wanted attention. He's somebody that wanted credit for his crimes. And so he thought by putting this theory out there, it might make the killer slip up, leave behind some evidence. It might make him do something to show that, yes, I was responsible for Misty's murder. And in doing so, he might accidentally leave something behind that would allow them to identify him. Now, that didn't happen. But it was around this time that the case did actually start gaining a little bit of momentum finally. Also in that same month, so December, Diana actually saw Reuben at a grocery store. When Reuben spots her, he immediately runs away, gets into a truck, and he points at her. And apparently when he points at her, the driver in the car, their eyes widen and they immediately just speed off in the truck. Later that month as well, this was a really hard month for Diana because it was December, the holidays were getting close, and it was going to be that first holiday season that Diana didn't have her daughter there. And not only that, but she was going to be alone. She was so exhausted from missing her daughter, searching for her daughter. She was exhausted from being sad all of the time, exhausted from nobody believing her about her missing daughter, and just, everything was on her shoulders. She was the only one left to search for her daughter, the only one that believed something had happened to her daughter. She had no help from the police, and it all just took a really big toll on her. And so she actually attempted to take her own life by mixing alcohol and antidepressants. She later woke up in a hospital and she was discharged a day or 2 later and had to go back home to her empty house to spend the holidays alone without her daughter. The next month, in January of 1995, a man, if you can even call him a man, named Robert Hickey was arrested for forcing a 15-year-old girl into his car and raping her. The spot where he picked this girl up was just 5 blocks from where Misty went missing. He'd seen this girl walking and he started calling out all of these disgusting things to her, like $20 for above the waist, $40 for above the waist, and I won't touch anything else. The girl, she's 15 years old, she starts running and she runs to nearby bushes to hide from him, but he found her, he put a knife to her and forced her to get into his car. He drove her to a wooded area in Pierce County where he proceeded to rape her and then throw her body into a 20-foot deep ravine, which he thought would kill her. He left her to die. She managed to crawl out of that ravine and make it to a nearby house for help, and she reported the incident to police. 5 days later, they located Robert. They arrested him. He was sentenced to 7 years, but astonishingly, he was released in 5. And if there's one thing I've learned over the last 8 years doing these cases and researching these cases is that sentences for rape around the world are far too lenient. And there are so many cases that I cover where, people will get out of jail for rape after some abysmal sentence, whatever it is, and they will reoffend. And not only will they reoffend, but they will reoffend worse, and it even sometimes leads to murder. Now, this guy obviously fits the bill for Misty's case because he's obviously disgusting and interested in young girls. He's willing to abduct them and rape them, and he abducted this girl just 5 blocks from where Misty disappeared. Despite this, he was never considered a suspect, and he was never even questioned in relation to Misty's case. Allegedly, his name appeared in her file at some point, but he was never questioned. And that's why, for obvious reasons, a lot of people believed that the police were not being very proactive in this case. So that same month, Diana made a TV appearance on a show called Northwest Afternoon alongside Misty's best friend Trina, as well as detectives from King and Pierce County, Jim Doyen and Jim O'Hearn. King County had no official part in Misty's case, but Jim Doyen was investigating the Green River killer, so he was exploring the possibility of a connection. So during the show, they make an appeal basically for people from the public to call in with any information, any tips about Misty's disappearance. And they get a call from a woman named Tammy, who claims that she had seen a girl matching Misty's disappearance walking south on Meridian, which is the main street in Puyallup, at around 10 p.m. on the night that she disappeared. On this call, Tammy said, quote, "She looked kind of sad, she looked like she was crying. She was walking with her head down. We didn't go up and talk to her or nothing, but maybe we should have. She just looked totally distressed, like she was in trouble." The producers asked her to stay on the line so that she could talk to police after the show, but I don't know if the call dropped out or if she just got tired of waiting or what, but they weren't able to talk to her after. They were never able to track her down. She's never come forward again, and they've never been able to interview her. So that's it. And other than that, they really didn't get any other leads. Corey Boba, he obviously continued his investigation, and he found out that his prime suspect, Randy, had actually been only a 5-minute drive from where Misty disappeared from on the night of her disappearance. He'd been at a hospital where his sister was giving birth. Corey also went back to his source that had told him the location of where Anna and Kimberly's bodies had been found, and he found out from this conversation that he had actually been searching the wrong side of the highway. So he organized to go and do another search on the 7th of February, and he made an announcement in the news that he was going to be doing this. So he made a public announcement, basically in the hopes, same thing as last time, same thing as why he made an announcement last time. He was hoping that the killer wanted notoriety, wanted to claim his victims, and he could lure him out. Now, when this search took place on the 7th of February, they go out there, they search the south side this time instead of last time they searched the north side. And this time they actually found Misty's jeans, and then nearby they found a pair of her socks and her underwear. But while Anna and Kimberly's remains were found, they were found sort of a 10-minute hike deeper into the woods. Only these 3 items of Misty's clothing were found, and they were found just kind of dumped right off the side of the highway. Diana was also there for the search, and she was able to identify and confirm that all 3 of these items of clothing did belong to Misty. It was the biggest breakthrough in the case, and really the only breakthrough they had had in the case. And while it was definitely a step in the right direction, it was devastating for Diana because it really solidified to her kind of, I guess, what she already knew but hoped wasn't true, that she was never going to see her daughter again. Corey actually described her reaction to the discovery, saying, quote, "Diana cracked into 30 million pieces." She was also angry. She was angry because for all this time, the police had spoken badly about her publicly. They had publicly said that Misty was not missing and that Diana knew exactly where she was. They had spoken poorly of her as a mother, and now here she is at the site of her daughter's clothing, which has been dumped off the side of a highway, clearly indicating that foul play was involved. Following the discovery, Detective Jim Doyen came out to the scene. He questioned witnesses there. He questioned Diana and Corey. He preserved the clothes for forensic testing, and he also set up 3 German Shepherds to come out and search the area that evening. The following day, King County sent up a helicopter with infrared technology to search the area as well from above, but unfortunately nothing more was found. When the forensic testing on the jeans came back, it also noted that there was a significant amount of dirt buildup on the jeans, which indicated that they hadn't been placed there recently. I also want to note at this point, Jim Doyen, the man who came out, was interviewing, set up the dogs, they're the county or the department that sent up the helicopter, helped search the area after the jeans were found. They weren't actually even officially involved in this case, and yet they had been more proactive in this case than the other 2 departments that were actually meant to be involved. Now, although this discovery obviously seems huge, there was something that just seemed a little bit off about it. If this was in fact the Green River Killer, then why would he leave Misty's clothes in a different location to the remains of Anna and Kimberly? And it wasn't even her remains that were found. The other 2 girls, their remains were found. Whereas Misty, it's just 3 items of clothing. Doyen had also searched that area just a week earlier and found nothing. He was alone, so he admits that maybe he could have missed them, but he was out there for 6 hours searching, so it definitely seemed weird that he didn't come across them. Maybe there's a possibility that Corey's plan did work, that when he made the announcement saying, we're going to go search this area on the 7th of February, maybe the killer saw that and decided to go and place the clothes there. On the 11th of February, so 4 days after the discovery, Diana did a TV appearance where she basically admitted that she believed the clothes had been planted there by someone else. And Corey also thought that the clothes had been planted, but he believes that it happened after he made his announcement. Now, at this point, some people actually started to look at Corey a little bit funny because they're thinking, how did this random crazy stoner dude know where to look? Even Diana became suspicious at one point, and she actually went into the police station to make a statement about her concerns. And when Sergeant Carver heard about the discovery, he immediately became suspicious of both Corey and Diana. Following the discovery of Misty's clothes, Corey and Diana actually managed to get the police to search a few more areas, whether it's because they thought Corey was involved and so he could kind of lead them to different discoveries as the killer, or if they actually started to believe his research. It's hard to say. Either way, none of the other searches they conducted actually found anything. Also, despite the recent success of Corey's searches, he was still facing the charges he received for dealing marijuana, and in February, he was sentenced to 14 months in jail. While he was in jail, the police asked a guy named Tim Cobell, asked that he hand over all of the information that he had gathered over the course of his private investigation, to which Corey refused, and he actually said, "F you," to Cobell, which is strange because he has always acted like he was determined to solve Misty's case, and now he didn't want to hand over any of his information. It's like he didn't want it to be solved unless he was the one to solve it. Or maybe he wasn't even really trying to help at all. I mean, his reaction is definitely strange. Corey actually wrote a letter to Cobell. Cobell is from the Pierce County PD, by the way. And in Corey's letter he wrote from prison, he says, quote, "Mr. Cobell, you're pathetic. You, Mr. Kojak wannabe, can kiss my ass and get a real job, get a life. Note, a polygraph would prove I'm honest. I dare you to do it. You know I'd pass. Yes, I've got a job too. I'm doing your job." Because they kind of accused him of having no job. They really didn't like this guy, right? They definitely spoke badly about him. They did not like Corey. They were looking at him suspiciously now as well, talking about the fact that the clothes had been planted, which obviously it seemed like they were, but I think they were kind of looking at Corey and Diana in kind of a sketchy light. Anyway, after Cobell receives this letter from Corey, he writes in his notes and he says, quote, "I received a letter from Corey Boba. After reading the letter, I'm convinced Corey Boba is mentally unstable. I believe he's an individual who has been unemployed for a number of years and living at home with his mother. It appears he has nothing constructive to do other than smoke dope and become obsessed with the Green River Killer. It's unclear at this time why Corey Boba is obsessed with Randy Achziger as being the Green River Killer and having killed Misty Copsey." So a segment airs on Crime Watch Daily, which brings in 28 tips, all of which go to Sergeant Carver, unfortunately, because he seems like the worst person in all of this, might I just add, because, I mean, you'll see more as we go. He never gets better. In fact, it's been about 6 months now since Misty's disappearance, and despite the discovery of the clothes, Puyallup PD, where Sergeant Carver works, still believes that Misty is a runaway. King County is taking this more seriously, and King County and Puyallup PD have started sharing a little bit more information about the case. Sergeant Carver also rejected the idea that a serial killer could be on the loose, despite the fact that Misty's clothes were found where the bodies of 2 other girls had been found. And he said, quote, "There isn't anything that would make someone think that we've got a serial murderer out there preying on young girls. Except for the fact that 2 bodies were found in the same place, and another girl who went missing, her clothes were found in that exact same place that the 2 bodies were found. Nothing else would indicate that there's a serial murderer out there." I mean, what is this guy smoking? Following the discovery of the clothes, they go and speak to Misty's best friend Trina, and she confirms, they show her photos of the jeans and the socks, and she confirms that Misty had been wearing those jeans and those socks on the night that she disappeared. She also told them that nothing out of the ordinary happened while they were at the fair. There was no one they could see watching them. There was no weird interactions. Nothing weird happened. They just had a good time. What she did reveal that was interesting in this interview, though, is that they had actually always been planning on getting a lift home with Reuben from the beginning. But then when they called him, he told them that he was out of fuel. Misty even instructed him on how he could get to her house, get inside her house, and get some money for fuel, and he refused to do that as well. Apparently they called him 5 times that night because they couldn't get through to him, so I think not all of those 5 calls actually went through. Trina did say that she didn't trust Reuben, but that she didn't think he was capable of or would hurt Misty. But at this point, Diana really started putting the pressure on the Puyallup PD to look into Reuben as a suspect. Or not even look into him as a suspect, just look at him closer, investigate him just a little bit. And they do. So they go out to his work. He works at a place called Adam's Ribs, and they talk to his boss there, a guy named Frank. And Frank tells them that Reuben told him that he knew where Misty's body was buried. He also said that Reuben allegedly told him that investigators were off in their search by about 6.5 miles. So after hearing this, they decide to wait at his work for Reuben to come in. And when Reuben gets there and he sees the police there, he just runs off. Eventually, they catch up with him, they bring him into the station for questioning, and when they ask him about Frank's comments, he just kind of brushes them off and he says, "Well, I did say it, but I was just trying to get Frank off my back. They weren't true, no idea where Misty was buried, I just said that," which is an insane thing to say to get somebody off your back. He told police that the story he had told Diana was true, that the girls had called him twice, but he didn't go and get them because he didn't have enough fuel. And he also said, get this, that he suffers from blackouts. How convenient. He reckons he suffered a blackout right after the second time Misty called him. And then he just doesn't remember anything that happened until the next morning. If that's not suspicious, I don't know what is. And then even stranger, he tells police that the next morning after he came to from his blackout, he drives out to his grandma's 100-acre farm in Buckley. This is a 60-mile return drive from a man who claimed that he had no fuel and no money for fuel. And he also had no reason to go out there because nobody was there. His family wasn't there. His grandma wasn't even there. So he just goes out to this farm, and this farm is also located about 8 miles from where Misty's jeans, her socks, and her underwear were discovered. And get this, the police never went to search the grandma's farm, which is crazy if you ask me. Here's this boy who's saying, "I blacked out for the whole night where a girl disappeared, a girl who had been calling me all night on the night of her disappearance. Didn't pick her up because I didn't have fuel money, but then the next day when I came to from my blackout, I did a 60-mile return trip to a place I had no business being or no reason to be, only 8 miles from where her clothes were found that she had been wearing the night of her disappearance." And they don't even go and search the farm. The police did ask him if he could have hurt Misty while he was blacked out, and he said that he didn't know, but that he couldn't touch a dead body and that he would never knowingly hurt or kill someone. They did give Reuben a polygraph, which was inconclusive, but leaning towards being truthful. But apparently during the polygraph, he was almost just falling asleep the whole time, which could have skewed the results and is also just weird. Reuben was listed as a person of interest in the case, but they really didn't have anything concrete on him, so unfortunately he was just free to go. I mean, this whole thing with Reuben is just so insane to me because his story's changed a million times. It's the sketchiest thing I've ever heard. Should they not search every inch of him? Should they not search his apartment, search his car, search his grandma's farm? None of what he said makes sense. Just baffling. And then after all of this happens, right, Diana gets a call from Reuben's boss, Frank, who says, don't listen to the police. Reuben is lying to them about knowing where Misty's body is. So this guy, his boss, is convinced that Reuben knows something. And to make all of this even more suspicious, shortly after being released by police, Reuben went and sold his car to the wreckers. And it was destroyed. And the police didn't bring him in again. They didn't, find that suspicious. I don't know. Anyway, as the investigation went on and more people were interviewed, one of Trina's friends let slip that she hadn't actually been entirely honest about the night of Misty's disappearance. Turns out she hadn't actually walked home that night. She had gotten a lift home from her 23-year-old boyfriend, Michael Reina, and she hadn't told anybody because she was worried about being judged for ditching Misty. Now, Michael is a dodgy guy, if you couldn't tell by the fact that he is a 23-year-old man hanging out with and dating a 14-year-old girl. But when he was 16, he'd been accused of abducting and raping an 11-year-old girl at knife point, although he was never charged for this. What's also crazy about Michael Reina is that not only did he have a connection to Misty through Trina, but he also had connections to the two other young girls that were murdered in Puyallup, Anna and Kimberly, which seems like an awful coincidence. Something else that came up in the inquiries as well is that his friends said that he liked to do these four-wheel trails, and he liked to do a lot of these near Enumclaw and Highway 410, which, if you remember, is near where the two girls' bodies were found, Anna and Kimberly's bodies, and where Misty's clothes were discovered. In a follow-up interview with Trina, she reveals that she had actually offered Misty a ride home with her and Michael, but that Misty had refused. It's not certain exactly why Misty had refused, but I'm sure you can probably draw your own conclusions. She probably thought Michael was a creep. She potentially disapproved of the relationship. When Michael dropped Trina home, he didn't come in. He just dropped her straight home. I mean, her parents are home and he's a 23-year-old man, but he just dropped her straight home and then left. And this raised even more questions about the timeline because he knew that Misty was at the fairground alone, so he very easily could have just gone back there and picked her up. And I also don't think there's anybody that can corroborate what Michael did after he dropped Trina home. And to make things even more suspicious, he followed Reuben's playbook, and in April, he sold his car. But he sold it to an undercover police officer. So they had the car forensically tested, but these results took ages to come back. In the meantime, they bring him in for an interview. He denied having any involvement in Misty's disappearance, and regarding the rape accusations, he said that the accusations were false, and that's why all of the charges regarding them had been dropped, which was true, they had been. He was given a polygraph test, and although he was shown to be deceptive in some areas, overall it showed that he was being truthful. Not that polygraph means much. Ultimately, though, he was cleared as a suspect, and the results from the forensic testing of his car have never been released, so I don't know, maybe that's because they didn't find anything. Nearly a year after Misty's disappearance, they decided to circle back on Reuben again, and they went and interviewed his roommate, James Tinsley. James tells the police that he does remember Misty calling twice and Reuben refusing to help her, but the reason wasn't that he didn't have enough fuel, it's that he had his 13-year-old girlfriend over at his house. So when Misty calls, the 13-year-old girlfriend gets all pissed off, she leaves, and then Reuben leaves as well, and James had no idea where Reuben went. But he said that he didn't come home until much later that night, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. He also said that he actually did believe that Reuben was capable of kidnapping and murdering Misty because he had a short temper and he was attracted to Misty, which is a deadly combination. So a week later, the police bring Reuben in for another interview, and his story is pretty much the same, but this time his timeline has changed. So now he's saying that he didn't go to his grandma's house the morning after. He actually went to his grandma's house that night, the night of Misty's disappearance. Which doesn't even make sense. I mean, maybe he just realized that his grandma's farm was near where all the remains and the clothes were discovered, and so he decided to change his story. I don't know. Either way, they give him another polygraph. He passes, and without any actual evidence against him, there's not much they can do, and so they let him go. In 1994, King County stopped looking into the case, and they handed it back over to the Puyallup PD. And then the case just sat dormant for a couple of years until 1996. It was approaching what would have been Misty's 18th birthday. And they were expecting some kind of breakthrough to happen in the case because her dad, Buck, was expecting her to call him on her 18th birthday. Detective Roger Cox said the investigation was, quote, a little bit on hold with her 18th birthday coming up, and said that if she didn't call, they would retrace their investigation. But of course, the call never came, and there are no records to show that they did retrace their investigation. Jim Doyen, who was no longer looking into the case, said, quote, my professional instincts lead me to believe she's more than likely deceased. The next year, in April of 1997, Corey Boba, he had been released from prison for his drug-related charges a couple of years earlier, and he was now facing drug-related charges again. He was being accused once again of dealing marijuana. He was facing 4 counts this time, and he actually fought it, and he, as part of his defense, he accused the Puyallup PD of conspiring against him to silence him. And he won the case against them, and as a result, he only got a misdemeanor of possession. But what came out of this is crazy. So actually, as a result of him fighting these charges and accusing the Puyallup PD of conspiring against him, he was able to unseal the forensic documents from 1993 regarding Misty's jeans that were found. The report detailed that on Misty's items that were found, they found hairs, fibers, and 3 red paint chips. None of these tied Corey's prime suspect Randy to any of the cases. However, it turns out that Corey wasn't totally misguided about Randy, because back in 1993, he was actually arrested and charged for the rape of 2 7-year-old girls. In the year 2000, Diana had Misty officially declared dead and held a funeral for her. As the years went on, sightings of Misty were reported, but nothing has ever been confirmed. By May of 2001, Robert Hickey, the man who had abducted and raped a girl just 5 blocks from where Misty disappeared from, was actually released from prison. And he is a prime example of why I say these rape sentences are too lenient, because shortly after he was released from prison, he attacked another woman. He attacked her, he groped her, he raped her, he pushed her down a 15-foot embankment. Thankfully, he was convicted of this crime for second-degree rape, and he is now serving a life sentence. Now, what's suspicious about him in relation to Misty's case is that at the time of her disappearance, he drove a red Camaro. Some people speculate that his car could have been the source of the red paint chips found on Misty's jeans, but despite this connection, he has never been interviewed in relation to Misty's case. Later in 2001, there was actually a breakthrough in the Green River Killer case, and they identified the killer as Gary Ridgway. He pled guilty to killing 48 women. He actually admitted to killing as many as 72 people, but said that he couldn't remember all of them clearly. In 2011, he pled guilty to a 49th murder, but he's suspected of killing as many as 90 people. Gary Ridgway has never been connected to the cases of Anna, Kimberly, or Misty, and forensic testing suggests that he wasn't involved in the killings of Anna and Kimberly. These tests also suggest that the killings of Anna and Kimberly were not related to the disappearance of Misty Copsey. Allegedly, Gary had been working the entire day of Misty's disappearance, so he had a pretty airtight alibi. They also tested the paint chips found with Misty's clothes against paint from where Gary worked. He worked painting truck panels, and there was no connection. Also, if he's already admitted to killing that many people, surely if he was responsible, he would just admit it, right? I mean, he did say that there's about 30 other people he killed that he can't even remember. Maybe Misty's one of them, but the forensics, and his alibi, it doesn't seem likely. Corey also, he was really obsessed with the Green River Killer, and he thought it was Randy, and he still to this day does. He rejects the fact that Gary is the killer, and he has not given up in trying to prove that Randy is the killer. He thinks Gary is a scapegoat. Police actually did look into Randy in relation to Misty, and they compared paint chips and fibers from her jeans to samples from his car, but they found no connection. At some point though, those paint chips from Misty's jeans went missing during testing, but they still, in the end, said that there was no connection to his car. By 2005, the Puyallup PD still had not changed their stance on Misty being a runaway. So Diana wrote a letter to the Washington State Patrol and she said, quote, "Puyallup is still operating under the premise that Misty is alive and well. That feels like some kind of inhumane torture when I hear that. Please override the Puyallup police and take the case away from them. I'm asking you now to enact your jurisdictional authority over the Puyallup police and seize this investigation in its entirety." But this request was denied. In the summer of 2006, Diana hired a private investigator to take a closer look at Reuben Schmidt, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to continue paying for his fees. So he prematurely wrapped up his investigation and he said, quote, "It is my assessment and recommendation that Boba inhibits any relationship that you had or potential relationship you could have with media, law enforcement professionals, and myself. It is my belief that to have him speak on your behalf or to represent you in any way has and will impact your search for the truth in a negative way." After all of these years, Reuben is still considered a person of interest, and since Misty's disappearance, he's actually had a few run-ins with the law. He was accused of rape in 1996 by one of Misty's best friends. 2 weeks after the report was filed, she backed out and refused to press charges, allegedly because she didn't want to undergo any additional stress. He was also convicted of theft in 2000, and he had a domestic violence protection order placed against him by his wife, with whom he shared 3 children. He allegedly threatened to burn her house down with the children inside, and also threatened to send guys there to rape her, beat her, and rob her, and said that when they were done with her, she wouldn't be breathing anymore. Over the years, a lot of people have questioned Corey Boba's involvement in the case as well. He actually did have a pretty solid alibi for the night of the murder. He was assaulted by one of his neighbors, and there was a police report filed at 1:30 a.m. which confirmed this. He's also never owned a car, and he's never even had a driver's license, so the likelihood of him being able to abduct someone or being involved in this case is pretty slim. He believes that Misty's body is buried at a property that Randy used to own in Eatonville. In 2013, the hairs and the fibers that were found on Misty's jeans were tested, and they weren't found to have a connection to anybody in their database. The hairs weren't found to belong to Misty nor anybody she knew, but they said that they could have easily come from just somebody that she came in contact with at the fair that night. In 2015, a post on a UK website actually claimed that Reuben and his uncles were involved, and that this was a big family secret that they have been hiding for all of these years. But yeah, that is all of the information for this case. So I would love to know your thoughts on this one. I would love to know what you think, who you think is involved, what you think happened, because there's 5 people or 5 suspects that people believe could be involved in this case. Obviously there's Reuben, who in my opinion is the sketchiest. Considering, his ever-changing story, his convenient blackout, his grandma's house that he went to, nobody was there. It's only 8 miles from where Misty's jeans were found. The things that his roommate and his boss have said about him, that random post on the UK website, and not to mention his convictions and his arrests in the years following the disappearance, which include domestic violence and rape. You also have Robert Hickey, who is a convicted violent rapist of a 15-year-old girl who he picked up just 5 blocks from where Misty disappeared. And he has never been even questioned in relation to this case. You also have Corey, who I don't personally think is a viable suspect. Some people do. I really think that the reason people do is just because of his fascination in the case, which they think is weird, and then also because he managed to find the jeans, but he didn't find anything else. And he wasn't just obsessed with Misty's case, he was obsessed with the Green River Killer who has been caught. But I think he just has weird vibes, and maybe he's a little bit kind of suspicious seeming, but I think that's just because he's got a weird vibe, honestly. He's still trying to go after Randy, and Randy, mind you, was also a shitbag. He was arrested and charged with molesting 2 7-year-olds. He had a red car, and on the night of Misty's disappearance, he was only a 5-minute drive away. And then lastly, you have Michael Reina. He's a suspect that also gets mentioned a lot. He is obviously a creep. He was 23 years old, dating a 14-year-old girl. He had he's known to be into younger girls. He had a connection to Misty, Anna, and Kimberly. Even though Kimberly and Anna, it was determined that there was no connection to their cases and Misty's case, it's still a weird coincidence, right? And then also, he knew that Misty was alone that night. He dropped his 14-year-old girlfriend off at home, and then he left. And then what did he do after? Not sure. But he knew that Misty was at those fairgrounds alone. And even though they've kind of said that Anna, Kimberly, and Misty's cases aren't connected, there is still definitely a possibility that they are. And a lot of people think that they are. There are some people out there that actually think Misty ran away, which I don't think is the case at all. And I don't know how you could think that. She was on the phone to her mum trying to get home. She was with her friend actively trying to get home. She wasn't, in an argument with her mum. They weren't in a bad place. She had no reason to want to run away. She had a good life. She had a lot of friends. She was getting good grades. She was playing a lot of sports. She was happy. By all accounts, she was happy. And to just, at 14 years old, run away for the next 30 years, over 30 years, it's closer to 40 years at this point. It just doesn't make any sense. And how would her genes end up there unless she planted them? But that's crazy because then she would still be in the same area and nobody's seen her, nobody's heard from her. Doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that's everything for this case. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let me know, what do you think happened? Who do you think was involved? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to be down there chatting because I really want to know your thoughts on this one because I just cannot believe, I really think they would have solved it if the Puyallup PD weren't such shitbags. I mean, I don't have another word for it. The way that they looked into this case is so frustrating. I cannot even imagine how infuriating it must have been for Diana. To hear them publicly say things like, she has not run away and Diana knows exactly where she is, it would ignite a fire within me so intense. I can't even imagine. To not only lose your daughter, no closure, no idea what happened to her, and then to be treated like that by the police and have nobody back you. Businesses are taking down your flyers, the media stops reporting on it, the police are talking badly about you. I just cannot even imagine. After 27 years of searching for answers, Diana unfortunately passed away in February of 2020. Her legacy is being carried on by her son Colton, who she gave birth to after Misty's disappearance. Misty has now been missing for over 32 years, and if anyone has any information, they're urged to call the Puyallup Police Department at 253-770-3343. In my opinion, I also think there is one particular suspect. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. I feel like we might be in the same understanding with that, but let me know your thoughts. That's all from me today, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a great week, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.